While much of the focus of next year's election is rightly on the presidential race, the balance of power in Congress is on the line again as well. In the Senate, 11 key races will help decide just who has the power on Capitol Hill. I'm joined now by Rob Jesmer, the executive director of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, and Guy Cecil, the executive director of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Kind of sense a theme here. I want to start. I know there are lots of Senate races we could talk about, but let's be honest. The race that everyone is focused on, or at least I'm focused on, is Elizabeth Warren versus Scott Brown in Massachusetts. Elizabeth Warren got in this race, former official in the Obama administration, got in this race, raised a lot of money very quickly, and is now up with ads. Yes, it is November of 2011, but is up with ads. Let's listen to a little bit of that. We'll come back and talk about it.
For years, I worked to expose how Wall Street and the big banks are crushing middle-class families. It just isn't right. I stood up to the big banks and their army of Washington lobbyists. I worked to hold them accountable. I led the fight for a new agency to protect consumers, and we got it. But Washington is still rigged for the big guys, and that's got to change.
So this is, Rob, a very traditional biographical spot. This, I should note, American Crossroads, a conservative line group, it was already up with ads essentially saying Elizabeth Warren sympathizes with Occupy Wall Street protesters and she's radical. This ad makes Elizabeth Warren seem pretty reasonable. Am I right?
Well, Chris, you're going to find it shocking. I disagree a little bit. The one part of the ad I think you missed, which I think is most notable, was she regretfully talked about how negative campaigning is entering into Massachusetts politics and how she laments that. When for months all through the summer, Democrat group after Democrat group was going up on the air, spending millions of dollars destroying Scott Brown's record, and she didn't seem to be limiting those ads. And so when you contrast to that, which she said she's the intellectual foundation for Occupy Wall Street, you saw what happened last night in New York. They're destroying public parks all throughout the country. There's been sexual assaults in Dallas. There's been a gunshot in Oakland. And so I think what we have here is a race where Scott Brown's trying to put together Republicans, Democrats, conservative, and independents, and Elizabeth Warren is trying to be the left's poster child. I don't think Massachusetts is a liberal state. I think it's a Democratic state.
This is an early starting campaign, but she is a national figure in many ways. And it seems like, and Guy, tell me if I'm wrong here, it seems like what we're doing right now is a fight for who is Elizabeth Warren. Is she, to Rob's point, is she kind of a radical extremist, or is she kind of a populist with the story that she tells in the ad? You've met her, you've spent time with her. How do you win that battle? Obviously, you know that battle is coming. Who is Elizabeth Warren? How do you win the battle? The ads are obviously a part of it, but that's not the only part of it. Sure. What helps you win that battle to convince Massachusetts voters that she isn't an extremist, that she is in fact kind of one of them? You win the
argument by telling the truth, which is what I think Elizabeth Warren does. I think it's been really a sign of desperation, what the Republicans have tried to do with Elizabeth Warren. At first, they tried to compare her to Martha Coakley, as if the voters of Massachusetts can't tell the difference between two women who are running. Then they tried to make her the elitist, radical professor from Oklahoma, which hasn't worked. They pointed out that she raised money from national groups, despite the fact that Scott Brown raised 60% of his money from outside groups when he ran. And then they, tried to point out that she was out of touch with Massachusetts when 11,000 people in Massachusetts have made a contribution to Elizabeth Warren. She had 1,200 people, a presidential-sized crowd, show up for a volunteer recruitment meeting. And I don't think there's any question that if there's one person that's in touch with what Americans are going through, their struggle, middle-class families, working-class families, it's Elizabeth Warren. And so we look forward to having this argument.
Well, and I would say the one thing, and we'll move on, though we could talk about Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown for the entire show, but the one thing I think we can agree on is this is going to be an expensive and relatively nasty race. Do we agree on that, gentlemen?
I think it's going to be expensive.
Oh, expensive. Sure, well, comparative. I shouldn't say nasty. Let's move to, I want to talk about a couple other things. Sure. One is close to us here in Washington, Virginia. This is Tim Kaine versus George Allen. If it's not the marquee race, it's one of the marquee races. The race is statistically tied. You've got two former governors, Kaine, the former chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Allen, a former senator. We've got a Quinnipiac poll, 45-44. Rob, what do you make of this race? Is this going to be within a point the entire time? And how do you differentiate? I mean, it looks like both of these guys are very well known, right? So how do you win a race where people know basically almost everything about both guys?
Look, I think this is going to be a close race. There's no question about it. The president needs to win it, and so there'll be a lot of money spent here. But we feel good about where we are. Governor Kane clearly did not govern the last year like he wanted to run for statewide office again, authored the largest tax increase in the state history. Most recently, spent the last couple of years campaigning for the president's agenda, which was roundly, I think, widely, and then last year's election was widely put aside. So we feel good about where we are here, but this is going to be a close election. There's no question about it.
Now, Guy, I want to ask you about this. Rob mentioned it. The president is targeting the state, obviously, of Virginia. Sure. It's a state he won for the first time since Lyndon Johnson as a Democrat in 1964. What do you do if you're Tim Kaine? Do you run? Should you? Let me ask you this. You're a strategist, one of the lead strategists in the party. Should Tim Kaine run with President Obama? He was his Democratic National Committee chairman, or should he run away from him, given that President Obama is less popular now in the Commonwealth, certainly, than he was in 2008?
I would say the same thing to Tim Kaine that I would say to every Democrat running for the Senate. When you agree with the president on something, say so. When you disagree with the president on something, say so. But at the end of the day, Tim Kaine and George Allen is going to be about Tim Kaine and George Allen. Just like all of these races around the country are not going to be a referendum on the president. They're not going to be a referendum on the Democrat. They're going to be a choice between the two people on the ballot.
And let me ask you both, just a yes or no. Can we see an Obama-Allen victory or, let's say, a Mitt Romney-Tim Kaine victory? Are Virginia ticket splitters, or is the presidential race going to determine who wins the Senate race? Rob?
I think George Allen can win under a variety of circumstances.
Look, I think the Senate races around the country all can run independent from the president. I think it's true in Montana, Nebraska, Missouri. I think it's true in Virginia.
Rob Jesmer, Guy Cecil, thank you for joining us. I love nothing better than a little Senate talk in the morning. Right.